Great, Dennis.
Hey, welcome to session 4 of our 6-session series of Leaders Lunch and Learn. And we've been growing and learning in how to build teams and maintain teams and grow teams and make sure we have healthy teams available. So thanks for joining in and watching this. Today it's Rod and me, as you can see from the screen. But we're going to keep going, and hopefully you can follow up and watch this on the video at some point. And we're also going to try to get these on podcasts, so you don't have to actually sit and watch the video. You can listen to it. So that's a step we're going to take and transfer all of these videos to podcasts, so you can listen to it on your way to work, while you're getting ready in the morning or whatever, because this kind of information is invaluable. So this is session 4. Rod, Kaya, thanks for, you all know Rod. So Rod, let's jump in here and tell us what we're going to do today.
Oh, great. Thank you, Dennis. And thank all of you who'll be, absorbing this content together. And I'm just grateful to be able to share some of these insights, and hopefully it will serve us all well. So the fourth topic today is what I would call the team's Achilles heel. And the kind of sub-statement to that is how to address the problem area in your team. And I want to begin this conversation. Now, it's kind of interesting that when we are in an area that we're continually challenged to focus in our strength, why are we spending on the topic of our weaknesses? And that would be a good question, because at the end of the day, a weakness is just that, a weakness. It'll never be a strength. For example, I'm right hand, and no matter how hard I try to improve my shooting skills in terms of basketball, with my left hand, it will be never as good as my right. So that's the whole idea. Why would we focus on our weaknesses? And we will address the answer to why we were addressing this topic a little later. But I want to get back to this statement that has kind of made its way into our normal conversation, which is an Achilles heel. So in Greek mythology, when Achilles was an infant, the story went like this. It was foretold that he would perish at a young age. So to prevent his death, his mom, Thetis, took Achilles to the river Styx, which was supposed to grant an individual the powers of invulnerability. So simply what she did was she held her baby, she dipped his body into the water, but because she held him by the heel, it was not touched by the river. And Achilles grew up to be a pretty substantive man of war who survived many great battles. However, because of that one area where Thetis, her mom, held, that area was vulnerable. So the term Achilles heel is a weakness that we all have in spite of our overall strength, which can lead to a downfall. And, though the actual mythical, kind of the original story referred to a physical vulnerability, the idiomatic kind of reference, the way it's attributed or the quality can lead to downfall are common across many different areas. And the way we often hear this kind of term, like Achilles heel term used, is often in reference to a sports team. So take, for example, a sports announcer may be covering a game, and let's use the NBA Finals. For example, he might say something like this about a certain team. So for example, the Boston Celtics, he might say, the Boston Celtics' Achilles heel is that they're giving up too many offensive rebounds. That's the vulnerable spot on the team that it's holding them back from victory. So again, for the kind of conversations that we've been having, I'll be utilizing the church context to kind of illustrate these points. Now, the reason why I think it's important for us to spend the topic on weaknesses, because in the context of team development, what are Achilles heel cannot be ignored. So in the sports sense that, using the Boston Celtics offensive rebounding, for those of you who follow basketball, that's not something they can simply bypass and overcompensate by just focusing on their strength. That's actually something that needs to be addressed. And when we are talking about an Achilles heel in reference to our specific teams, this is not necessarily referencing to an ongoing challenge that continually needs to be managed. This is something unique and specific to our team. And the whole idea is if ignored, will always leave us exposed to a less than optimal team results, and then often long-term team development. And, it's been often said that we are never stronger than our weakest link. So the way this kind of process begins, that I've kind of learned throughout the years, and just to give you a little bit of my pastoral background, I've served on various different church staffs, about 3 of them, Crossroads being one of them. And these have been common denominators I've seen across the board. And what I would ask is that you translate this into your own ministry context. But what I've observed is that every ministry team or department has an Achilles heel. And I'm not going to go through all the departments that we have at Crossroads or all the departments a specific church may have. But what I'd like to do is maybe address a few of them to kind of give context to what we're talking about. So, for example, when we think of the kids ministry or the children's ministry of a church, we might want to ask the question, what is the Achilles heel for that? What is the area that if left exposed or attention not being given to can derail that ministry from being effective? And what I've observed, and again, this is up for interpretation argument, but this is to make the point, it would be people. Now, we can make the argument any volunteer team is made out of people, and that would be true. But if you've been around the church for any amount of time, you would find that the kids ministry is an area where exponentially so the importance of having a healthy reservoir of teams and teams in volume to pull off the work of the ministry. This is not to make light of a team that I even help overseeing right now, for example, guest ministries. I think any person that's serving in hospitality, an auditorium host, or one of our greeters would never say the emotional or the focus output that they have to do would be equivalent to that of someone serving in our kids. And therefore, to avoid the level of, we need people. Small groups. What about small groups? Small groups is contingent upon leaders, where we are entrusting a group of leaders to shepherd or to lead a small group of people. And what I've often experienced, and this is from a wealth of different churches I've had the privilege of working with, even in some consulting work, the number one challenge I've seen in small groups is the word confidence. When trying to raise up leaders, the word confidence comes up, where people in our churches are often more mature than they are confident. So what does that mean? What that means is that oftentimes, you might, to raise up small group leaders, you would ask other staff members, hey, I need you to bring your list of people who could serve as a potential leader. And when we do so, we find ourselves surprised to say to ourselves, such and such is not already leading a group. Sorry about that. Such and such is not already leading a group, we might ask. And that's because oftentimes they are more mature and then they are confident. What does that mean? Is that oftentimes those that are often most spiritually, emotionally mature are the ones that take a very humble disposition. And they would often say something like this: well, I could never do what Ryan does, or I could never do what Dennis does. Now, when they say that, what they're saying is not that they expect to be giving a message or a presentation of some kind. What they're saying is oftentimes that they don't know the Bible enough, or they lack experience. And so the Achilles heel for small group development is confidence. Okay, worship. Moving on. There's a lot of different things. Worship requires a certain level of skill, but what I've seen across the board in many different churches is the Achilles heel of worship is character. The weightiness or the influence level of the role necessitates this. They're given a high level of influence, they're put on the platform, and many of us may not recognize this, especially because you serve in some kind of key leadership role. But for the average attendee, anyone that's seen on the stage is given a certain level of weightiness. And that's what our culture shares, right? Anybody that's on a screen of some type, anybody that's given a platform is a person of significance. And how many times have we often seen, if you've been around the church world long enough, churches being derailed because someone lacked the character, had a character deficiency that had a very prominent upfront role, and that caused the church to what? Lose trust, lose confidence. So the tricky part with worship, yes, there is a skill level to be able to play an instrument, to be able to sing, but character is often the level place that we need to make sure we're addressing. Here's another one: video production or creation. We live in an era where so many things are video driven. And one thing I've learned too with working with numerous churches is that there is never enough help to do video content. But here's the Achilles heel of video production or creation: it's skill or time, because it's very specialized. And given the fact that often our programming offerings need to be done every single week, whether it's a new service, an element for the particular Sunday morning service or kids experience or whatever it may be, there's simply not enough time to be able to train someone to video edit, to splice together videos, to render a video and that sort of thing. So oftentimes that's the Achilles heel. That's very, very specialized. And we often don't have the time to be able to train someone. Last one that I'm going to use as an example, guest ministries. So guest ministries, and the Achilles heel of guest ministries is what I would call relational reciprocity. Guest ministries, the whole nature of it is to provide a quick initial look, touch, and a word to let people know we appreciate them being there. Sure, it would be great that if we could spend more time with people, but that sometimes goes against the effectiveness of what a guest ministry person does. So for example, if we lock ourselves into a conversation at the door, that might be great for some people, but it could hinder people from getting through the door. We might neglect 4 or 5 people going through the door that could have been greeted. So the idea of it's meant by quick touches to acknowledge the person's presence and to let them know we are glad that they are here. However, over time, what I mean by relational reciprocity is they don't get a lot of feedback from that. They're not getting, so the person that sings a song that somebody might come up to them, up to the stage, and man, that song really blessed me today. Or maybe even in the kids ministry, as hard it can get as it can be, somebody gives the leader a hug and they feel affirmed that they're making a difference. But oftentimes in the guest teams, you don't get that relational reciprocity. So the drift is to something that can provide more of that feedback, where they can get the feedback that, yes, I am making a difference. So those kind of things make it tricky. Also, guest ministries tend to be easy in, meaning it's a great accessible way to get involved. But when it's often easy to get involved, it's also easy to get out. So those are, like I gave 5 examples, very ministry specific, of what I would consider their Achilles heels, the area that if left exposed can often derail or slow down the ministry from reaching its full optimal potential. Okay, so the key is, let's get on the solution side of things. The key is to determine what is the antidote to the problem or the solution, or how do we address the weakness? And when we figure this out, this becomes the focus of how we build our teams consistently. So using that sample size of ministries I just kind of created, here would be maybe some ways that we would think about of kind of covering up or making sure we're addressing the Achilles heel. So in kids ministry, when we said people, often the antidote to that is a 52-week approach toward team recruitment. Certain teams go through seasons when they try to onboard people. They might have a specific event that they utilize to encourage people to come in and get involved and convert them into long-term regular ministry team members. But for kids ministry, coming up with a strategy to a 52-week approach to team recruitment. Small groups. If confidence is the Achilles heel, incredible clarity of what the role entails. That becomes from everything from defining what the role is. So Dennis has often used in the past the term host. And the term host is very simple. Have to love people, offer something to drink. Open up your home, serve something to eat, and then turn on the DVD or turn on the streaming device. But making it clear that what we're asking them to host, not necessarily be a Bible scholar. And that kind of is the antidote to this confidence barrier. When we talk about character for worship, it could be a strong screening or onboarding process to kind of address things before it becomes a problem later down the road. Video production or creation, if the Achilles heel is skill or time, oftentimes what we can do is expanding roles for individuals to participate and absorb on-the-job training. So what do I mean by that video production one as an example? So I've seen this happen. In fact, I've worked with a couple of churches on this that have the same kind of challenge, having a high volume of output, needing volunteers, but don't have the time to train for skill. Well, what they do is they open up roles, for example, as someone being there to just set up lighting, or someone there to for the video capture, someone there to just maybe do cleanup in the video booth. And when they do those things, they also get to watch people render or do some of the video editing, which gives them some on-the-job training. Guest ministries. If relational reciprocity is what's needed, I found the antidote for guest ministry is vision that continually reminds them that their short-term interactions are producing long-term relationship commitments. So I know I went through this really quickly, but that's a way to begin to look at this whole idea of the Achilles heel. So what I would challenge all of us is for discussion is to discover what is our team's Achilles heel. What is that area that is unique to our team that if left exposed can cause speed bumps to slow us down from us experiencing optimum ministry outcomes and overall long-term ministry development, team development. And then the second question, once we identify what our Achilles heels is, how do we address the problem? What is that thing that we need to consistently and regularly be addressing on a regular basis? So I would leave that to you for your discussion this week or when you absorb this content. So thank you.
Rod, since we have just a little bit of time, a couple minutes,
Yeah.
let me ask this, and maybe you're not prepared, but I just listed some other areas where maybe you could go, in my experience, and you have a lot of
Yeah.
experience, these are the Achilles heels. So for instance, office, like answering the phone and the reception, what is the Achilles heel of that particular function of the church?
Well,
And I'm
that's
going
a
to
really
ask you
good.
about 3 more. So if you go,
Give me thoughts on that one. Let's go back to some other ones.
okay, what about facilities? You know, what's the Achilles heel of the facilities team, the facilities whole area? And then those were the other 2 that I just see, you know, that
Yeah, no,
that
I think
function broadly here.
so. I think the idea of the so let's address facilities one. Dennis,
Okay.
you probably have some great insight on this too, so please chime in. So I think for facilities, what I've observed with that is that it's out of sight, out of mind, right?
Yeah.
It's out of sight, out of mind. So that is the Achilles heel. And the idea of a facilities team too is, and that's not something you want to have being present, because usually a
Give me an
facilities team,
example of out of sight, out of mind.
okay, so for example, oftentimes, for example, like yourself, Dennis, you would be someone I would consider a regular teacher or a regular host at Crossroads. So by your very nature, you are given an upfront platform
Sure. Okay.
that gives you recognition. So even though you're not up there, let's say promoting volunteerism, or you're not promoting the gala, for example, or peacemaking opportunities, by the very nature, you're given exposure. If someone were to say, hey, I'm interested in helping out with CASA, or I'm interested in helping out Edmondson, who would I go to talk to about that? And I would say, you can talk to Dennis Anderson. He's one of the, in fact, he was the person that hosted 2 weeks ago, and said, oh, Dennis. That would be given a reference point. Whereas someone in our very specific instance at Crossroads, someone like Cy, though he's very visible in the Sunday morning experience, he has a lot of things that he's attending to. He's not necessarily given that platform. So it's out of sight, out of mind.
Gotcha.
So we have to do some extra work to bring that to the forefront. That's what I've observed.
Okay. And what about the office personnel, reception area, answering the phone, all of that? What's the Achilles heel of that?
I think the Achilles heel of that is understanding how consistency or lack of consistency is the Achilles heel of that. Because when you think of the office function, admin function, it's built upon consistency, right? We know that someone's going to answer the phone. We know that office hours is going to be this particular amount of time. We know that these specific functions are going to be done. So there's a lot of routine to that. So I think the Achilles heel is not boredom necessarily, but recognizing the importance of routine and consistency.
Yeah.
Because at least that's what I've observed. But Dennis, what about you? What's your thoughts on those two?
Well, I remember a story I heard at the Global Leadership Summit where they talked about the critical transaction. What's the critical transaction in this particular business, organization, et cetera? And they used the example of a hotel. And they thought, well, what's the critical transaction? Well, these days, it would be making the reservation online or calling the hotel and making a reservation with the person who makes that. And if that fails, everything else doesn't matter. If you don't book the hotel room, your business goes belly up. And so to identify what's a critical transaction. So they talked about in that day and age, again, most people book online now, but it was making the phone call. And they said hotels typically staff the person who answers the phone with the least competent, least paid person. So their critical transaction is in the hands of the person who is the least equipped and the lowest paid. And they re-examine that whole deal. And so in a church, you got to ask, well, what's our critical transaction? And when it comes to the office, and I would say, you know, sometimes people do their first interaction with a church personally is online. All right, they go to the website and look, you know, but then if they need to call the church, you know, who's the person that answers the phone? Can they answer the questions? Are they friendly? You know, I've called churches and or schools or whatever, where the person who answers the phone is just grumpy. And your whole impression is shaped by that, even the tone of voice on the phone, or you might get a voice message. Even the tone of the voice message, the person who leaves the voice message on the phone. Hey, thanks for calling Crossroads Church. It's so great. So glad you called. So I would think, you know, the Achilles heel perhaps of the office reception is what you said: consistently friendly, kind, and able to answer this person's questions and follow up, to be able to go, you know what, I don't have the answer to that question. Instead of going, hey, I'm going to give you so-and-so who can, say, let me track down the answer for you and I'll call you back. So that's, you know, Dennis, just some.
I think that's spot on. And let me go back to the facility. So this might work because oftentimes built into the facilities umbrella is security.
Yes.
The security teams, right? So I just worked with this church that has a large security team. In fact, they have even a full-time church staff member that oversees the security team. And one of the things that was discovered through our conversations was simply this, that one of the things that holds them back is they need to have overall church knowledge.
Yes.
Because oftentimes the person with the name tag or the person with the badge or who's behind the counter is seen as a person of expertise.
Yeah.
And he says that it's amazing how in the course of not only on the weekends, but because they're a 24/7 operation, they have a multitude of experiences taking place throughout the week, because we are the most constant person there.
Yes.
You know, pastors aren't there all the time. We don't have the same volunteers all the time, but our security is. And oftentimes we're the person they see walking around and they ask, hey, where is the, in our case, we might be, where is the divorce care group meeting tonight?
Yeah.
Or where is the youth meeting tonight? I got some kind of email that they're not going to be in the youth building. And he says that oftentimes, he said it's so disappointing when his team is met with oh, that's a great question.
Yeah.
Or let me get somebody on the radio, or, you know, that sort of thing. So I know for them, one of their things is, I think the way he said it was not to look ignorant.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, because you know, amazingly, you would think security is about safety and, you know, those type of things. But he says not to look ignorant is the area that they need to continually manage, because there are way more incidences, like 100 to 1 or whatever it is, of people coming to ask for directions of where a class is versus a real incident that requires their help. For example, they might have left their keys in the car or someone slipped and fell. He goes, those rarely ever happen, you know, where security might be involved. But he said, for us, we get answered questions all the time.
Yeah.
And he said, for us, is not to look ignorant.
That's good.
So I think, you know, you think of facilities, right? Like Sai, he would be the guy I would think would know stuff, because
he knows stuff.
Yeah. So anyway, but those are two good areas, Dennis.
Yeah. Well, let's see, Rod, our time's up. Let's give us a teaser for session number 5, which is going to be in July.
Okay, let me look at what season 5. Hold on, Dennis.
Sorry, I didn't. Let me give you.
No, that's good. No, I think the other thing that you know, it's always a good lesson, by the way, to, I think, address what the Achilles heel is. And the thing I do want to mention is what we don't recognize is the very thing that we're trying to address is actually a strength, not a weakness. So does that make sense? So like, for example, if we have a strong volunteer team for kids, that becomes our strength.
Yeah.
You know, if we have great, confident, mature leaders for small groups, that's a strength. If we have, you know, great facilities people that's well-rounded. Okay, so that's, I just want to emphasize that. So the next one, what we're going to be talking about is, and this is true for staffing or volunteers, is setting expectations high and early is the topic. How to onboard the right type of volunteer from the start.
Perfect. Okay.
So that I'm looking forward to unpacking that together.
Okay.
All right, Dennis. Thanks again.
Thanks, Rod.
Hopefully,
thank you so much. Care. And we'll catch you on the next one of these.
Absolutely. Take care.